Welcome to Education in Focus, where today we are discussing trauma-informed schools. Joining us today is Jason, our education expert.
Hi Lee, love to see you again.
Hiya, and we are really lucky to have Hayley, who is the head teacher at Spen Valley High.
Hi, Hayley.
Hi, Hayley. So, I'm really excited for this conversation. I know Jason is too. The first protocol, I guess, for me, Hayley, would be, what do we mean when we say a trauma-informed school?
Yeah, I think it means lots and lots of things. Actually, it's difficult to put into one sentence. I guess it's looking at reasons why children behave in the way they do, because we believe that behaviour is a form of communication, and then trying to support them with any trauma that they've had in their lives. And it can be any level of trauma. And I think that all children have experienced trauma in the last couple of years with the pandemic, where they've not been able to socialise, where they've not been able to mix with their families, their loved ones, their friends, etc., going to school as normal. So we support them with that, but it's also, I think it prepares them for the wider world, because if you look at anything in the world, so for example, if somebody misbehaves and breaks the law, there is no one definite punishment. People always look at the context, mitigating circumstances. So I think when we talk about behaviour policies, preparing children for the adult world, then it actually should be a more relational approach or trauma-informed approach. But for us, it means everything. It means the curriculum that we follow, the lessons that we teach and how we teach them, the relationships that we build with our young people, even down to how we recruit our staff, the training, the CPD for our staff. It looks at the additional support, which we have a wealth of in our school. But everything that we do, and trying to help those young people to, I guess, regulate themselves when things get difficult, and to be able to navigate through life in a more resilient way. And I guess genuinely be kinder to everybody. That's probably the main crux of it, so that the world's a better place.
Wow, it's incredible. And I wish every school could take that approach, Hayley. But I guess it was really hard. Maybe I'm only imagining, to break from this traditional norm of school. How have you found that, and what drove you to want to do this?
Yeah, I mean, I've been ahead for 12 years now, but I've been at Spen since September 2018, and I guess I've evolved in the way that I do things, both as a teacher and as a head over the years. Um, the system that we had at the time, which was a behaviourist approach when I joined here, it wasn't improving behaviour, which I believe they don't always do. If it did, and if it was a deterrent, you'd only need one detention or one suspension, wouldn't you? Or I guess
Exactly.
in the wider world, you'd only need one prison sentence. But we had high levels of detentions. We had where they were copying out the rules of the school. We had high levels of lesson removals. We had high fixed term exclusions. Outcomes weren't where we wanted them to be. And I'll be honest with you, we're not where we want to be. We're not the finished article. I'm not sure we ever will be. But I think a lot of that, the kind of the reason why we're not where further on is because of the pandemic. And it wasn't really working. So we needed something different. And I guess I'm a bit old fashioned. I've been teaching 33 years. And in those days, you just had a piece of chalk, no behaviour policies, no speeds of learning. You had a piece of chalk and a personality. And it seemed to work in some quite challenging circumstances. And I think it goes back to high quality teaching and good relationships, because it's much harder for young people to misbehave, as it were, for people that they see as a human being, and vice versa. So we set about it, and I was really fortunate. I'd been to the ASCL conference and I'd seen a stall by the attachment research community, and I thought that sounded interesting, and it sounded similar to what we were trying to do. And we've done it very gradually. We haven't done it, everything in one way. It's been a long journey, and 3 steps forwards, 2 steps back, I guess. But it is hard work, because it's about relationships, isn't it? And we all know that relationships are about compromise, working together. Some things work, some things don't work. Some people get on, some people don't get on. And of course, we're a microcosm of society where other things will be happening, discriminatory behaviours, people will be angry, people will be aggressive. And, we absorb a lot of that. So it is hard, it's difficult, it's easier to just kick children out of your lesson,
Yeah.
and it's easier not to have to speak to them about why things aren't working. Um, but we think it's the right way, and every time, and we do evaluate it. We do question ourselves a lot to check we're on the right path. But we've worked really closely with the Alex Timpson programme, the Hadley Trust, and the Reece Centre at Oxford. So it's rooted in research with human beings as opposed to dogs and rats. So yeah, we believe in it and we believe it's right because it's how we work with our own children. And I guess if it's not right for our babies, then it's not right for somebody else's babies. So
Absolutely. What have you found difficult, or did you find difficult about implementing it, or still now? What are some of the challenges, Hayley?
um, I think if you have a consequence or behaviourist approach, and obviously there are variants of those. So I don't want to, and they're very successful in some schools. So I'm not, this is our way of working. I'm not going to, and our preferred way of working. So I'm not going to damn other schools that are very successful. But I think if you have one of those approaches that has a roadmap of consequences for a misdemeanor, I think it's quite easy to manage because you get this and this happens. You do this, you get this happens to you. Whereas ours is more about thinking, about deciding, which takes time. So I think the effort that you have to put in is harder, as it is as a parent. Um, I think also one of the biggest issues for us is willful misunderstanding of the approach. So people and across Twitter will say there are no rules, there are no sanctions,
Mm.
which is absolutely rubbish. And that I think is, even though I stand up and I say that's not true, people still would use that against us. And I think it's sloppy understanding of it really.
Mm.
The other biggest challenge I think is because it is harder. I think it's harder for staff, and I think you have to be very committed. I have some absolutely amazing staff in my school, and we make a really big thing about it in our recruitment that if this is not the way you want to work, this is not the school for you. But
Yeah.
of course, it isn't for everybody, and certainly when we started to introduce a more restorative way of working, I think some people, naturally didn't like it. And I think that makes it harder to recruit because we know there's a recruitment crisis in the country with teachers, particularly secondary school teachers, particularly in certain subjects.
Mm.
And in our locality as well, it's not easy to recruit. So I think, it's harder when we say you're going to have to work harder at this, you're going to have to give a bit more, um, rather than just knee jerk to sending a child out of your lesson. The lessons need to be really structured and bespoke to the children. So I think that's been difficult. And then you start thinking, is it because of the way we're doing running our school that people don't want to come here? But what we have been able to do is to recruit some what I would consider vocational staff, vocational teachers, vocational pastoral staff who want to work in this and also have previously worked in behaviourist approaches and feel this is better. And I think also probably one of our biggest uh, challenges is because of our approach, we often get we have a lot of students that come to us who have experienced trauma, and that makes us it feels a little bit sometimes like we're a go-to school for children, and that becomes, I think you can then have capacity issues sometimes with that because when you've got lots of children who've experienced these difficulties working together, that in itself brings challenges with it. But again, like I said, I've got an amazing team of people that manage that. And I guess our older children are really able to articulate the differences that they've seen positively from moving from one approach to the other. And I think some of our younger children don't necessarily think, I think they think it's the norm to be in a school
Yeah.
like this. and sometimes don't always. I guess we feel they don't always appreciate the support that they may get, which I think parents do, don't they?
Yeah. Just say, go to a school, go to the school, spend a
Yeah,
day there, and come back and tell us whether you still think. I know. I was thinking about what you said earlier, Haley, which is about perceptions that you sometimes have to manage around people, perceptions that you're somehow not. You don't have rules or expectations and boundaries, of course. I think back to the therapeutic parenting. The similar things are often felt by parents and carers who've got these children who may be kicking off in a very public place, and people think, oh, they're not managing that child. I can see why they're doing that, can't you? It's down to them, and there's this feeling of judgment suddenly on them. So I completely understand how that must feel as well. I'm sure there are parents listening to this that may have had that experience in a different way, but that kind of feeling that you can't just be hard. In fact, I remember something you said. The reason I found out about you actually was through this education event, online event back in, I think, about November. And one of the things you'd said, which really struck a chord, was you can't punish the pain away. I
Oh,
thought that's just
wow.
such a wonderful phrase. I don't know if that's something you have on a banner or something, but
I
it's
think I stole it from somebody actually, Jason. I don't think it's my words. I think somebody else probably already has, but we genuinely believe this, and there's a passage in Paul Dix's book, When the Adults Change, that talks about the children
Mm,
experience having the invisible shrapnel of trauma. And one of the things that really made me think is when we talk about people who have post-traumatic stress disorder from being through warfare, we
Mhm.
talk about them as being heroes or being brave. But when we talk about children who experience this
yeah,
invisible trauma, we say they are naughty or they are difficult. But for many of those young people, they will have been
mm,
facing an emotional battle in their lives.
Yeah.
And I think they show courage and they show bravery and they show resilience. And I think we should treat them with the same compassion as we do for people who go through those physical fights. And particularly because they are children and they don't choose to be in those situations. I know not everybody chooses to be in
yeah,
war, but they have had no choice about being in that environment. So yeah, we think it is about looking at that wound that's caused their emotional well-being.
yeah. And isn't it sometimes the case, if we've sometimes said in other recordings, that for a child or young person to get to school, just to turn up was a massive achievement already. They've overcome a huge amount of either real difficulties because the families might have been chaotic, or they're just internal stresses that they're experiencing at that time that made it very difficult for them just to sort of
Yeah.
take those steps. So actually interesting to say, for example, do you have any flexibility around arrival times for children? So those that just struggle to get in on time.
We have what's called a personalised learning provision, which is exactly what it says on the tin. We call it the PLP, and our children will refer to the PLP as a room because there are some key spaces. But actually, it's an entity. It's how we approach young people. So it might be, like you say, that some children have an adaptive timetable, um,
Mm,
and certainly if they're late, and it depends because some of them do need to make up the time. You can't just say you can walk into everything late and then in life you
yeah.
get sacked from your job. But it's about looking at the reasons why they're late, isn't it? Rather than just saying you're late so you get this. It's actually looking at it and understanding it. Because like you say, some children getting into school is a massive achievement, and you don't want to immediately turn them off the environment by coming down hard on them. But you also need to teach them that timekeeping is
Yeah.
important. um, so yeah, we do have adaptations like that, but we have huge amounts of support through our PLP, and they are really highly skilled staff that work with some of our most dysregulated children. Although saying that, we're a school of about 952, I think, at the moment, and almost a third of our students have at some time this year been on our PLP
Right.
register. And it might not be for anything physical, it might just be because they've got some literacy catch up, or they're seeing a school counsellor. But we have bereavement counselling, we have Lego therapy, art therapy, we've got a garden where they work in. We've got two well-being dogs that they might
Oh,
walk and
right.
talk. One of them's called Steve, one's called Ralph, and some children read to Ralph on Friday. Um, we have children working on art therapy, working in catch up. We have breakfast club. We actually, that doesn't really describe it. We have all of our children get free breakfast if they want it in the morning when they come in. But then we have an additional breakfast club, which is more about socialisation and about re-regulating children. All of our children are in a coaching group, and all of our staff, apart from a handful of coaches. So you sit in a circle, a coaching circle, and we've all been taught regulation strategy, zones of regulation. So, I mean, that sounds much more successful than sometimes it is. But it doesn't always work like that, and lots of times it doesn't. But we have some children who, particularly post-pandemic, and I don't think we're unusual in this because I talk to lots of other head teachers, where children are finding it difficult to get into the classroom, and so they will be given potentially the choice of maybe the sensory room to go to, or another of our PLP rooms, to re-regulate and then get into the classroom. And if they choose not to use that support, then obviously there are sanctions, because you can't then have children just wandering around the school. So that's where the support is there first and foremost, to manage their trauma. And then if they won't, then we have to do something else about it. But we don't have isolation booths. We stripped those out a long time ago. And we have key members of staff above and beyond their coaches that might be the person who works with them the best. So yeah, there is I think I've waffled on a bit there, but there's a lot of support for our young people, and it is whatever works for them, really. And sometimes they have to be told, no, that's not the right thing, because that's what you do with your own children.
Yeah.
But yeah, what we try to do is we try to provide a space that if they are really struggling, that they will, with a person that they feel they can just sit and get to the point where they're able to get back into the classroom. So yeah, we have lots of stuff. We have a very common sense approach to uniform as well.
Oh,
which
this sounds
Please tell
exciting.
us, Hayley.
yeah. We have a uniform because I think it's about identity, and I think it's about equality. And it's about saying who we are. I mean, I have to say, put my staff behind me. We've just won the second year in a row the Yorkshire Rugby League Cup final with our Year 11 team. They were Year 10 last year.
Wow.
And for the second, yeah, I know, I'm very chuffed. And for the second year in a row, we're in the national finals. We lost last year, so
Come on.
hopefully. I know, but that sense of identity about being our school, and there's a couple of gents in there that have come from other schools where it wasn't so successful. So it's a real boost. I mean, their coach is amazing.
Yeah.
He's very inclusive. So in terms of that, the colours of your school, who you are, that's really important to us. However, I believe that children, and I learned this by going to another school actually. I believe that, if they've got green hair or blue hair, they're telling us something, aren't they? So our kids have different colour hair. They wear jewellery. If they lose it, they lose it. It's up to them. We're not going to go looking for it. So if it's your grandmother's heirloom, don't wear it. We don't. My girls' skirts are too short. I tell them that, but I'm not going to measure their skirts. And we lend uniform if they haven't got it. But we're looking at changing it slightly to get rid of ties, because I think teaching and politicians are the only people that still wear ties. And also we're looking at getting rid of our blazers and just being school jumpers, because we think that'll be cheaper. But what I don't do is I don't put children in isolation if they haven't got their uniform, and we talk to them. So it might be that some children have not stayed at home, or they've had some difficulties, but it's about talking to individuals. Everything is about knowing the individual child and having that conversation with them. So yeah, that's what we think about uniform. I wish it was slightly better, but I'm a bit more old-fashioned. But I do think you can't stop children going to their lessons because they haven't got the right length skirt on.
No, I mean, it does get a bit ridiculous, I think, sometimes.
The other thing is during lockdown nobody wore uniforms, and it was okay. We survived, didn't we? The country didn't fall into disrepair. Well, certainly not because of uniforms, but maybe something else.
Absolutely. I mean, I agree with the ties and things. I always used to get, I did get occasionally people who just say to me, like sometimes as parents or governors, say, I think we should have a tie for this uniform. It would be much nicer if the children wore it. So I said, why? What's it going to do apart from create another thing for the people to have to buy and lose, and kids to ping and twing?
Yeah.
It's not. Is it going to make education? Is it going to help their education? No, let's just focus on another thing. It's
Yeah.
just sometimes I think it gets people lose what's real,
Well,
Yeah.
I
what's
think the
important.
pandemic has helped us refocus about what priorities really are for young
Mm.
people. And it's about trying to keep them smart so they can get a job, and they can feel.
Yeah,
Uh, I think one of the things for me as a young person is I never really knew what to dress for the occasion because of my background. So I think uniform helped that's what you wear for the occasion, and I think that's good for young people. But the world has changed. People's smart dress is different to what it was 30 years ago, and I think sometimes schools get stuck in these traditional ways of working. So yeah, we take off non-uniform jumpers if they're wearing red hoodies. We take them off because it's not the uniform,
yeah.
and we confiscate them till the end of the day. But yeah, we talk to individuals, the reasons
And
why.
it goes back to what you said, doesn't it, Hayley, of that context, putting it all into context
Yeah,
of that child and what's happening. It's incredible.
absolutely. Yeah.
I'm really enjoying hearing what you do. And I think when you said, talked about how they can come in and have their free breakfast, their coaching circles, and how sometimes it's probably not successful. I think there's still, in my opinion, a success just in the messages that you're giving to the children every day when they come to school, that they're embraced, that they're included, that they're accepted. That in itself, I think, is a huge success because I've seen schools where the minute children walk through the gates, this is a day of having to either mask or contain or feel scared or alone. So I think there's a lot to be said
And
just for,
shame, of course.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of. I can see what a lot of you're saying is, Hayley, is you're taking away a lot of the shame, aren't you? Like isolation and things like that.
Yeah, we like to think so. I mean, I'm always really honest. We're not always. It doesn't feel that successful all the time because when you're working with young people who experience difficulties in their life, they may express their emotions in sadness or anger, but we have a lot of people who contain them and who support them. Um, I think some of our young people might say they don't think it's supportive, but then I know
Mm.
when you talk to them in their most regulated state and you say, well, what's it like? Have you got friends in other schools? And they go, oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And we had an
Mm.
assembly just before we closed down for Easter about just focusing on some key things about mobile phones, etc. Next half term. And I was saying how we perceive the way we work with young people, because they're young adults, they're not
Yeah.
babies, is it's like a bridge. We meet them halfway and they meet us halfway, and we have those dialogues, and we try to explain to them the reasoning behind everything that we do. But I guess that we don't always do that. So something we've put in place for after Easter is in our coaching circles once a month we're going to do question time. So if they've got any questions or any suggestions, etc., they will put it to their coach. That will come to the senior leadership team and we'll respond to them. And I said to them, I might not always agree with you because we run a school, uh,
I
and
do
we've got
have a job to do.
and we've got budgets, etc. But I try to explain to young people why we do what we do. And I think that means they get it a bit more. They feel like they know what it is. Not every person will believe that we're doing a good job. Um, you know, as I say, we absorb things that go on outside in the community.
Yeah.
So if you've got, racism or sexism or homophobia or transphobia that's being played out in the media, which there is so much at the moment,
Mm.
we've only got 5 hours a day to dilute that. And of course, during the pandemic, we didn't even have that. So yeah, we know that it isn't perfect, and maybe it never will be perfect, and that's okay, I
Mhm.
think. But
Yeah.
do we care about our children? Yes. I think they understand it eventually, and certainly we have external reviews quite regularly to just keep an eye on where we're at. I guess it is. I use the phrase "way in the pig," but we have people come in to see that what we're doing is okay, because we had Ofsted a year ago, but we don't want to then just carry on for the next 4 years and not have anybody check on what we're doing.
That's
So we had
brilliant.
a safeguarding review, a full safeguarding review the other day, looking at climate, looking at health and safety, looking at behaviour, looking at safety. And we know, we're really honest, there will be some bullying that goes on in a school, but it's how you then manage it.
Yeah.
And we know that some people's perceptions may be different to what's actually really going on.
Mm.
And when we explain it to them, I think they understand it. So yeah, we try our best. It's not always perfect. In fact, it was never perfect. never
I don't
perfect.
think anyone ever could be,
No.
and no one ever expects it to be, would they? I mean, it's just dealing with people is never going to be perfect.
Yeah,
A complex organization of people with their emotions and feelings and unpredictabilities is never going to be, well, whatever perfect is anyway. I
yeah.
mean, what is that?
But certainly in this review, they were asked, the children, the groups of children, they had free rein to go and talk to any child that there was, they wanted to over the 2 days. And he is a person with, he's an Ofsted inspector, so I used somebody with some knowledge of the system. And when they talked about it, the words they were using to describe the school were really positive, really complimentary, inclusive, diversity, caring, those sorts of things that you want to hear. And there will be some that, but the other thing about our school is, you hear kids talking and laughing a lot on the corridors. It's noisy. It's not a silent school, which
Oh.
sometimes I wish it was quieter. But when I do my dinner duty, we have 3 areas for lunch and break, and I look at them. I watch the children a lot, and you see them laughing. You see them disagreeing with each other. You see them joking with each other. And when this reviewer came in, one of the kids said to him, "Mister, we don't get any food. We never get any food given to us. They starve us." And I was like, "Oh my God." And then afterwards she went, "No, they do really." But it's like, actually, they can have a bit of banter with people. And I think
Yeah,
that's part of growing up, isn't it? That's what you want from young
Yeah, yeah.
people.
it
So
is.
yeah, they're really, really funny, our kids. They tell you like it is they're not shy.
No, no.
Well, you want them to be confident,
Yeah,
though, don't you? I
yeah,
suppose that's you want them to go out with some self-confidence and feeling of self-worth.
yeah, yeah.
That's wonderful. It's all music to my ears when I hear all this stuff. I think, yes, it's great.
Brilliant.
I have to say, like you, looking back 2 years ago, I don't think I would have been so trauma informed. I didn't necessarily do things in the way that I wish looking back, I wish I did know things then that I know now. But that's the nature of everything. I say, yeah, I mean, years ago, wasn't as trauma informed as I am now, and certainly don't feel like anything like an expert. There's always so much more you can learn, but it's one of those things, isn't it? We live and learn as we go along.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
certainly wasn't. When I started teaching 33 years ago, and looking back, I trained in a school in Toxteth, and looking back, the classes that I had there, I can now look back at those children and think, yeah, they were experiencing trauma, and I just kind of muddled my way through because I don't think anybody really talked about it then, even though the theory
Mm.
of trauma, attachment trauma, was known then. I don't think it was being applied in schools necessarily, and certainly my own personal experiences. My mum passed away when I was 12, and my sister was 15, and my auntie looked after us emotionally, even though she didn't live with us. I was brought up between my gran and my dad, and my dad and my gran were very not emotional people. My gran had been through the war, and it was all a bit stuff and nonsense. And
Mm.
so we were told not to cry because it would upset everybody. So we didn't. Um, and then when I became a teacher, which I knew I always was going to be, which my family didn't go to university, so it was quite a strange thing. Um, I think I thought for a long time as, well, why can't these people just get on with it? Why can't they? Because I just got on with it. And I
Yeah.
think I was a bit, I don't know if the word is unkind, but I think I was a little bit that it didn't resonate with me that people couldn't deal with it in the same way. And I don't think I've always been successful at managing it. But then when I had my own children, I saw things in a completely different light as a parent. Um, and I think certainly over the years, you start to change the way you are. So I'm a bit like one of those people that have given up smoking.
Mhm.
I've put in those terrible isolation booths in schools historically, uh, and I'm ashamed of myself. But if you don't then start to see that things change, and if you don't evolve, then I think that's the biggest problem.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wasn't great then, but that's how it was. The other bit that I realised the other day, as I was walking the dog, is I wondered why, even though when I was younger we didn't have any support when my mum passed away, and we didn't have any involvement from social services because you just wouldn't have wanted it then. But then with my own children, whilst they would certainly say I'm not a perfect mum, they're successful young men now, and I've got two stepchildren who are equally as successful. And I was thinking, why is it if I didn't have that experience of being parented well, how come? And then I realised that actually, whilst we didn't have the support emotionally, we didn't go to school and then get put in. isolation booths, because in the 80s that wasn't the way schools worked. It was much, I think it was
Mm,
a more relaxed way of working. And
Mm.
I think now a lot of our parents who are struggling with their own children and their own trauma is because they have experienced those behaviourist approaches for the last 10 to 15 years.
yeah.
And they're then struggling to express their own emotions because they've been told not to. Then they're struggling to manage any child's emotions because they've not been allowed to. And I think on top of that, some teachers don't know how to manage it because they've been trained in a system that
Hmm.
doesn't help it. So I think we've
Yeah.
kind of reached a bit of a crisis point in education. Nobody knows how to manage emotions, and we're all too scared to, because once you open it up, it can be a really difficult thing to absorb. And sometimes you just got to be a bit brave, haven't you?
Yeah.
Brave or stupid, I don't know which it is.
Oh no, definitely the former. I think the reason we want to talk about these things in such depth, even though most people listening to this are parents, is because I think they need to know that this is what it's like, and that actually there are schools out there that are striving to get everything, striving to do the best for their children and young people who've been
Absolutely.
through difficult experiences. So because they may be sending their children to schools where it's not quite so successful, or that maybe they're not invested in such the same way. So maybe wonder about your training, because I know you said your staff are incredibly skilled and must be incredibly dedicated, and the training must be phenomenal, I imagine. So I'm wondering what kind of training you've put staff through.
Yeah, I mean, we were really, really lucky that we were part of the Alex Timpson program when it came out. And I think that was amazing. And that went on for about a bit longer than it should have done because of the pandemic. But of course, what I was quite conscious of is all those people that were here at the time had that. How do you make that sustainable? So it's very
Mm.
much part of our induction. So every person, regardless of their job, goes through some work on trauma-informed approaches. All of our staff have emotion coaching training because they are coaches. All of our staff do work on behaviour management and applying our relationship policy. We don't have a behaviour policy; it's called a relationship
Hmm.
policy. So which it has all those necessary things that link to the guidance on behaviour. So they all have that, and then there is key training for individuals. So it might be emotion coaching, it might be therapeutic story writing, it might be bereavement counselling for those people that work within our personalised learning provision. And on top of that, we still do all the other things like subject specific training for
Mm.
teachers. What we tried. Oh, we've also just joined the care leaders for their their 12-month program for identified staff, and hopefully that's just starting because we've started it now. But yeah, what we try to do is we have a bespoke training package for staff. It's a bit like a web diagram, so where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, because we don't want to waste people's time because we know time is precious. So if you're really, really skilled at, I don't know, as a teacher, you're really skilled at questioning, you wouldn't necessarily get the training on that, but you actually might deliver the training on it so that we
Mm.
can use the expertise in school. But of course, there is whole school training as well, the normal safeguarding things that we do. But I think it's about making sure that it is bespoke to the person. And we try to do things with people, not to them, where we can. And I think a lot of training is just sitting and talking and
Mm.
discussing. We did some training in January that looked at some case studies of students, anonymised and made it so that you couldn't recognise the young people in our school. But I think there is a danger sometimes that if you do some training on trauma, the theory is quite powerful and it's quite sad and it's quite easy to buy into. But then when you link it to actually managing a person in those situations, it's quite difficult. So we keep revisiting how we embed our trauma informed approach. That's a regular ongoing thing. It wasn't done 5 years ago and that's it. It can't be. It has to be regularly done. So yeah, and there may be bits that people come to me and say, "Well, I need a little bit of something on that." But yeah, hopefully we get most of it.
It sounds incredible. It
Yeah,
really does.
that's
Hi. Sorry, Jason.
oh no, no, sorry, I was
You
jumping.
go.
I love that idea of relating it back to those case studies and all constantly rooting it back into the reality and saying this is the theory, this is the training, but how is it going to be interpreted for that young person in their situation? and what can we do for them. That's brilliant.
Yeah, incredible. I know I keep saying that, but it just is, Hayley. It's incredible. Um, I wondered, kind of as a trauma informed school, how do you work in partnership with families, or how would you want families to work with you? Because we kind of always say, in some senses, it's co-parenting. And I just wondered, what in an ideal world would you want in the relationship between you and families?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is absolutely co-parenting. There's the phrase, isn't it, in loco parentis, and I don't believe that we should behave in a way towards somebody else's children that we wouldn't want for our own children, and I strongly believe in that. But obviously, the way I parent might be different for somebody else's children. I think I think from the beginning, it starts at the point of people applying for a secondary school. So first of all, I always say it's a little bit like, I mean, I've never done them, but those those dating apps.
Yeah.
I've definitely never done them. I'm going to keep saying that. But I think it's a little bit like you have to decide on the school that you want to send your children to, and you will have some level of parental preference.
Mm.
And I guess at the very beginning, understand that they are a school and they will run things maybe slightly differently to how you want to do, because schools have things they have to do that you
Yeah.
don't have to do at home, and vice versa. And there may be some things that you don't like, but sometimes you have to just go with the one that you agree with the most, I guess.
Mm.
And it's a little bit like when you sign up to the school, you sign up to the terms and conditions of that place, because we have to manage behaviour, for want of a better phrase, in the way that we have to do, because we've got 950 students compared to what you do as a parent. So I think the first bit is apply to the school that you want and be aware of what they do and be aware of how they run their school, and ask them and talk to them about it. I guess the second thing is support your child in adhering to their expectations about whatever they may be. So, if a really good example is if they're not allowed to have their mobile phones out, as a parent, don't ring your child up during
Oh
the
yeah.
day and expect them to answer it. I mean, it's a really simple thing. But also, what we find from some of our younger children, because it's very much part of a kind of maturation thing, is if they've fallen out with their friend, they might phone their parents and say, "Oh God, they're screaming at me and I'm screaming at them," and the parents will then come up and demand to see you straight away. So I guess the second thing is, uh, when your children talk to you about what's gone on, they will give their perception,
Yeah.
and there will be, if you've got a school that is good, they will look at everything. So if, for example, there's been two kids that have fallen out, and it's led to physical confrontation, which it does happen, we will take statements, we will look at a matrice, we'll look at balance of civil proof, which is what we have to do, rather than beyond court law. We take a lot of time in that.
Mm.
But remember that your child will only see it from their viewpoint, and to listen to what the school has done, as long as the school have done it properly. I think it's okay to say what's happened here, what's happened there. Um, I think the next thing is, for me, and this happens, I guess, as kids transition from primary school to secondary school, because the relationship changes. I do like to speak to parents, but I'm not the first point of call.
No.
And sometimes we get some people that would come up and say, "I want to speak to the head teacher. I want to speak to her now." And all I would say is, just imagine if you're going to see a doctor. Not that I put myself in the same, ranking as a doctor, but you don't get to see them when you want them at the time.
No.
And I think when you are really struggling as a parent, and I get that, I understand it, because there's nothing more important than your children. I think that can play out sometimes in your own um, anxieties that can be quite aggressive for some people.
Yeah.
And we try to manage that because we understand that's what people are going through. But I think one of the problems that's occurred recently, nationally, as I've spoken to lots of people about this, is people are encouraged to, complain to the MP, complain to Ofsted, complain to that, rather than actually talk to the school
Yeah.
and say, "Look, I disagree with what you've done. That, can you explain to me why you've done that?" And social media is a terrible thing for that as
Mm.
well. And
Mhm.
actually we run Saturday surgeries once a month for our parents who may not be able to come during the week working week. So we try to do that, and I think it's about, if you have children that are struggling, or you're struggling with the way the school's working, is communicate with them through talking to them. Don't be a keyboard warrior and send it at 8 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night
Yeah.
when you're feeling really upset. Work with them how you want them to work with you. And then, sometimes there has to be a bit of a compromise. Um, and I guess if you want the school to be trauma informed, you have to be trauma informed yourself. And by that, that means everything that I've said. You have boundaries for your children. That you will put sanctions in place if they don't do it right. And what I would always say, my biggest piece of advice to any parent is never say, my child would never lie to me,
Oh.
because they do.
They do.
and I always say, did you tell your mum everything when you were little? So I think there's those things, is to be open minded in the way that you want your school to be open minded.
Yeah.
And the other thing is if there's something going on in your child's life that may cause them to be dysregulated, is keep the school aware of it, because we can only act on what we know,
Mm.
and whatever that support may be. I think it's been an incredibly difficult time for families,
Mm.
parents and carers. They've been expected to work and home tutor, and to manage their children when they've not been able to go out, which we know is really hard. And I am a parent. I know that's been really difficult. So we believe in working with our parents, and I believe that, sometimes our parents can be really dysregulated themselves, and I say, come and have a cup of tea, or, we've got tissues in my office, and actually I know what it's like, because no one gives you a manual when they're born, or
Mm.
when you adopt a child and say, this is what's going to happen when they're 13.
Yeah.
If only we just realised that I think we should all be a little less judgmental of each other, judgmental of parents. Like you said, Jason, when the toddler's lying in the supermarket aisle screaming and
Mm.
shouting, all I would think is, there but for the grace of God, because my kids would have done that. And just be kind to each other, and non-judgmental, and non-judgmental to schools if they're trying their best to be trauma informed. I'm not suggesting you don't disagree with schools for 1 minute, but I think it's about understanding the context that schools are working in.
Had a
So yeah,
flashback then. So you're talking about
yeah.
that. I thought you said about tissues. Oh, see, I just remembered box of tissues, parents crying in the office. On how many times that must have happened.
Yeah,
Because family life is hard. People's
really
lives are
hard.
hard. There's
Yeah.
always something going on, isn't there? And when you got a community of 900, which I didn't, I mean, you've got there'll be even if you've got like 1% of the family is going through a horrendous time, that's a lot of that's still quite a large number of people who will then probably need some support from you. It's just every day.
I think also as well, Jason, is the current economic
It's made everything
climate that we're
worse, hasn't
living
it?
in has made it so difficult for families.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
I think we always, as school leaders, or anybody in a school, has to remember that parents are just trying to do their best,
Hmm.
sometimes in very challenging circumstances.
Mm.
And I think certainly that's what made it better for me to be a leader, is when I had my own kids, realizing that. And what you should never do is come across as this kind of, you know, pontificating to parents how to do things. I'd never tell people how to parent their children, but I do think we should have boundaries for our children, so that they
Mm.
are successful in the adult world. But I also know how really difficult it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, if we could all work a little bit more harmoniously, and I don't just mean parents and schools, I mean everybody in society.
Absolutely. God, yeah, that's a bigger, wider issue. Another thing you mentioned was about people being encouraged to go to Ofsted and MP and stuff. The thing is, it doesn't have any effect, because if a parent goes to an Ofsted, let's say straight away, Ofsted just banned it straight back. And if it's something minor, they go straight back to school anyway. And they'll say, well, if you not follow the complaints procedures for a start, then they're not interested. And even if it's something more significant, they'll bounce straight back to the local authority. It very rarely gets Ofsted involved at all. People don't realise it's just they get hundreds and hundreds of these things every day, and they just have to be batted back, because 99.9% of the time it's not appropriate for them to deal with it. You may get that tiny proportion where it's something quite significant that might be a
Yeah,
real safeguarding
yeah,
issue, which is fair enough.
yeah,
They'll send the helicopters in and land on the
yeah,
school car park and send the inspectors in. well, not quite, but you know what I mean. If it's really bad, but it and again, the MP, what can they do apart from ring the school back or say, have you spoke to the school? Ultimately, you're going to have that conversation with the school, aren't you, somehow? So yeah,
Absolutely, and
it's
I
bad
think
advice if someone gives that to you, unless you have exhausted every other option. But
Mm.
that's exactly it. As long as you've exhausted every option, and of course, a lot of I think it was recently done, I think by Gavin Williamson, there was this portal of an email that you could complain to Ofsted. And I think it probably happened during the pandemic, but I'm not sure how well thought out it was. I think they received, well, I know they received an awful lot of these things. And as you've said, people have not been through the process. But if they're anonymous, nobody can actually help with that anyway, because
No.
you've got to know what the actual individual problem is. And if they want rid of a head teacher, that's not how it works. But also, if you've got a school that are trying to be trauma informed, what could happen, I guess, is the head leaves, you employ a new head who thinks that trauma informed approaches are not the way to go, and we start measuring children's skirts. So I guess be careful what you wish for sometimes.
yeah,
Absolutely.
And we also know that Ofsted, we don't need to talk about the terrible things that have happened recently, but we also know that, we don't disagree with being held to account, but it's got to be in the right way, hasn't it? We had
absolutely.
Ofsted a year ago, um, which was positive for us. We had a team that listened to the way we were doing things, and were very keen to understand it, I think, really keen to understand it, and understood the reality of what we're dealing with in this current situation with young people. So we were fortunate in that, but we're a year down the road, and that's why we need to keep making sure that we keep on our toes with making sure that we don't let standards slip. I think what we have to be aware of is if you only ever look at things like Ofsted grades or league tables, you may not get the school that is right for your child.
I
We
know.
will, our performance is not where we want it to be in terms of outcomes, but I think we're going to see a generation where that's going to be difficult, because you've got to get them into the classroom to want them to be able to learn successfully, and that's harder for some individuals, some young people. So yeah, we try to work really successfully with our families. We think, of course, that they know their children better than we do. Of course, we need to work with them, and we've got some really insightful parents in our school community, and and yeah, there's some that we might not always agree with, but those that come around and say, "Oh yeah, thanks ever so much," that's all you want, isn't it? That you work together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And I think when you can see, I think as teachers, you never really get the benefit for maybe 20 years later when you're in the supermarket and a tall chap or woman come up to you and say, "Oh, you used to teach me 20 years ago. Do you remember?" And I think that's it, isn't it? You don't expect immediate gratification as a teacher. But what we have noticed since doing our approach, as children go out of the dining room or etc., and I say, did you have a nice weekend? More of our kids say yes, and did you miss? And I say, have a nice day, and you
Oh,
miss.
wow.
And I think those little things, they're the things that you want from young people, that they recognise you, as a human being, um, and hopefully get away from that, the ghost children term that you used to have.
Yeah.
And you can do that by being on duty and having coaching groups, etc. Yeah, because our coaching groups are small. So
amazing. To a parent, if they want to ask schools, if they're thinking about sending a child to a school, or if they're at a school and they want to, I'm just thinking of sort of what would be suitable questions to ask that school. Maybe I don't know
yeah, yeah.
if they know their child has trauma and they've got a school with quite a particular policy, let's say, that's not on the face of it very trauma informed.
It's a legal requirement that you have to support the needs of a young person, isn't it? And even if they're not diagnosed SEND with an SEND, SEMH, is something we all have to work with. I would also say it's United Nations Rights of the Child as well, and the Equality Act. So all of those things.
Yeah.
I think it's about saying, how will you support my child? Of course, the difficulty is there may be some schools that you just can't work with as a parent, and that's quite difficult, isn't it?
Mm.
But I think don't give up is what I would say, and like you say, you exhaust all the channels that you can to communicate with them. there will be some schools that you just don't think are right for your child, and I think that's all right. But we need to have, I guess, we need to have more of a mix. I think there are fewer trauma-informed schools than maybe behaviourist schools, and it would be nice if there was a greater variety for parents. Because, like I say, some people think that a sanction-led approach is right for their child, and they're okay to have that opinion.
Yeah, it may well
Yeah,
be.
but I think the reason why heads don't want to go down that road is because it's hard, it's managing change. There is the fear of Ofsted and what that will be, the fear of what parents will say, the misunderstanding. So I just think if we had a few more heads that were, particularly secondary school, that took that decision, and I think there are. We're talking to some schools, and we're presenting at some conferences. But I think it'd be nicer if parents had that choice a bit more.
Yeah. I don't suppose there's a kind of directory, is there, of schools that follow a particular trauma-informed approach? It's almost like you need a trauma-informed kite
Well,
mark,
there
don't you?
is, there is. We there is the ARC. They have a self-evaluation tool, and so there is that bronze, silver, and gold that they will self-evaluate. We won the ARC National Secondary School Award in November 2021. It's and also the first line of our Ofsted report says pupils flourish in this nurturing school, and that's on every banner I've got around the site.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so I think there are things that you can do, but I don't think parents are aware of things like the attachment research community. So that is something that I think we maybe need to publicise a little bit more, because
Well, that's something we might be able to put
yeah,
onto the links as a link
yeah,
onto the
Yeah,
information with this
yeah.
podcast, actually. Yeah.
yeah, we definitely
Well, I knew you would be great, Hayley, to listen to. When I first heard you, I thought we need to hear more from her. She's inspirational. So I'm incredibly grateful for you giving up your time in what is a school holiday as we
Yes,
record
yeah.
this for you.
will.
But you're still in your office doing something around your school, so it just shows that level of
Yeah.
commitment that you've
Well,
got.
thank you very much for inviting me, and I always make it out that we are so not the finished article, and last term's been very difficult. So I hope it doesn't come across that it's all perfect here, because it certainly isn't.
No, it's been inspiring and insightful, and I know that me and Jason have really just thoroughly enjoyed hearing you and what you do, and I know
Thank you.
people at home will as well. And just thank you, Hayley.
And if you ever want to come and visit, you know where we are. Okay.
Lovely, thank you. We'll be there after Easter. That sounds great. So again, thank you so much to Hayley. It really has been such an incredible conversation. We really hope that you at home have enjoyed listening as much as me and Jason have today. And don't forget to look out for some of our other episodes, such as behaviour management, exams, and homework. And you can always contact us at education@adoption-focus.org.uk. Thanks for listening.